listen to all of that getting increasingly embarrassed. And I don't know much Arabic, but with my friends in Palestine there is one phrase that I do know, and that is the Palestinians and the Arabs generally have a phrase which is La shukra ala wajib, which means do not thank you for doing my duty. And it seems to me that all the things that we've done in the last 4 years, and I say we because it isn't about Michael Lavalette, it isn't a Michael Lavalette show, actually it's about respect, and it's about a group of people and what we can do in Preston. But over the last 4 years we have taken up issues together, not because we want to get our names in the paper, but because as elected politicians, as elected leaders of the anti-war movement, as elected trade unionists, that's what you're supposed to do. Or at least that's what you were always supposed to do, or what we thought you were supposed to do. And the tragedy is that in the modern world, the Labour councillors, the Conservative councillors, the Lib Dem councillors in places like Preston, in London, in Scotland, and wherever it is across the country, too often they don't do that. Too often they turn up outside your mosque, outside your church, in your trade union branch, in the month before the elections, and then they disappear for 11 months. And people therefore become cynical about local politicians. And it's actually, from my point of view, quite sad that actually you only have to turn up at mosque, outside mosque on a Friday, you only have to go to the church on a Sunday, you only have to be in the community centre, and simply locally people think that you're some sort of monster in the community who won't go away, and all you're doing is doing your duty as an elected councillor, as an elected representative. That's how I conceive it, and that's how all respect councillors and candidates conceive it. There is in this country a democratic deficit. There is a gap between what ordinary people want. We didn't want to go to war, we were dragged in to war. We didn't want to go to the war in Lebanon, and yet Blair said nothing, and Blair supported the Israeli state as that war took place. We don't agree with the privatisation of our hospital systems, and yet they go ahead with the privatisation of our hospital system. They even had something called a consultation locally. Now in my other job, I'm a university lecturer, and I know perhaps a little bit I thought about the English language, and I thought consultation meant talking to people, listening to people, and consulting. And in Preston, consultation meant asking you to fill in forms, do you want net care? Running it through the press, do you want net care? Having public meetings, do you want net care? And in each of those three areas, 98% of the population Preston said, we don't want net care, and the PCT said, thanks very much, you've got net care. That's not consultation, and that's why people become completely cynical about what is happening at the political level in this country. There is a gap, a democratic deficit, which good people have to fill. We have to step forward and say that ordinary people in this country deserve representatives who will listen to them, deserve representatives who will take their interests forward. Deserve representatives who will stand up and be counted, sometimes when it's difficult, but always being there with the people all the time. That's what I consider to be a good councillor. There are some good councillors in Preston, and I'm not saying that it's just respect, it's not just myself and Stephen. There are a few good Labour councillors, and I know who they are, but the vast majority have left all that behind and have got no time, in my opinion, for ordinary people or for making time for ordinary people. There's a second thing that I think that your representative has to do. Your representative has to take up the question of Valerie's rubbish, or your rubbish, or your bad housing, or your bad roads. We have to take those things up. That's what you're elected for, that's what they're there to do. But we have to also engage with the national political questions. The privatisation of our health services, our welfare services, our social services. When Amjad comes forward and says that the privatisation of the civil service means that 100,000 jobs will go, that there will be more crime will set up, that means for ordinary people, poorer working conditions, poorer wages, less trade union rights, and it means for service users, poorer services. We all know that privatisation means poorer services. We don't have to think too long about it to get that message. You only have to think a few weeks ago in this part of the country, when the Friday night high-speed train was going from London to Glasgow, and it came off the railways because it's privatising rail track, and they now no longer can afford to keep up the levels of maintenance that are required. That's what privatisation does. Privatisation costs lives at the very ultimate level, and we don't want that level of privatisation, and it's up to all our representatives, all our councillors, all our MPs to stand up and say, that's not the kind of world we want. We want to put people first, not the profits of the South African multinationals like Netcare. We want to put people first, not the billionaires like Richard Branson. We want to put people first, not the billionaires in the City of London whose bonus, not their wages, but whose bonus last Christmas would have paid for every resource, for every school child in this country twice over. That's the reality of the gross inequality that we have in this country, and it's up to your representatives. Also up to your representative to speak out about international issues. And those international issues are important for each and every one of us in every single day of our lives. The international issues are questions about climate change. The global warming that is taking place that means that while I might live to be 60 or 65 or 70 or 75 and see my time out in this earth, that my grandchildren will be faced with a catastrophe, that my great-grandchildren will be faced with a catastrophe, and it's up to us in government at local and national level to do something about that now, so that future generations are guaranteed to live on this planet as they see fit. We have to take action. These are global issues, and at council level we can do things, and I'm proud that the respect at the local level in Preston was able to push environmental policies through Preston City Council. There's that level of global interest. But of course the big global issues are all about the global issues of war and imperialism. And for me in particular, 4 years ago when I stood to the City Council, it was around the question of war and imperialism and trying to put an alternative voice to that question in Iraq. I must be honest with you, 4 years ago I wasn't sure that I wanted to be a councillor. In fact, the night before the closing date to put your nomination in, Mukhtar was twisting my arm up my back, and I had people from London constantly on the phone, and I decided that okay, we'll give it a go, and hopefully I'll get what I called a heroic second. And what I meant by that was that we were standing in the safest Labour seat. I didn't think we had a chance of winning, but if we beat the Lib Dems, if we beat the Conservatives, we could raise the anti-war voice. And then that night, suddenly I got elected, and I need to say my life has completely and utterly changed from that point on. When I went home, everybody else around me was smiling. Mukhtar had a smile on his face for about 2 weeks. My wife Laura was at the back, she was smiling. There's a photograph that they had in the local paper in which there are 5 people either side of me with beaming grins, and there's me in the middle thinking, oh good grief, what on earth have I done? And you can tell from my face, and I woke up the next day shocked and stunned. But I'll tell you what happened that day. Throughout that Friday I got phone calls. I got phone calls from people in Preston, I get phone calls from people in Glasgow, I got phone calls from people in Birmingham and London, and then I get phone calls from people in Australia, and then I get emails from people in America, and then I get emails from people in the Middle East and France, and suddenly I realised that one small election in one small town in the north of England suddenly gave a fraction of hope to people right around the world. And I was astonished that my election had had that impact. And we saw it on a much greater level with the election of George Galloway and Bethnal Green, but there is the majority opinion round the world looking for some hope and looking for some alternative, and respect is that alternative. And every time that we get an election and we get an elected candidate, you can feel the hope around the world as people say, at last an other world is possible, an alternative is possible, and it is possible for respect to win. Because it's very difficult for us to win in that electoral sphere, and every time that we take that victory, it gives that hope to absolutely everybody.